Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our Far Side panel discussion today. We talk about mobility and the necessity to go green. Time is right. We absolutely need to go green, but also we have problem and we have the dream to fly one day our cars. This is why today we have a very great panel of people investing and entrepreneur working in the mobility sector. So let me again thank you to everyone is watching today, and without taking any more time, I want to start introducing our panel. As Nick probably has some problem, we are waiting for Nick coming back. So Corrado, please, if you want to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, hi, I'm Corrado Accardi. I'm the CEO of Gempax. I'm Italian background as a chartered civil environmental engineer and then an MBA from the London Business School. And I'm an entrepreneur in a marine electric mobility. So we are targeting at the moment the Indonesian market for professional users and to effectively come with a full stack solution to the problem of range and implementation of the electric transition to remove huge emissions from the seas and the oceans.
Thank you so much, Corrado. Thank you. So Kyle, please, if you want to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kyle Kling. I work for MDI Ventures. MDI Ventures is the corporate venture capital arm of one of Southeast Asia's largest conglomerates. We have about $1 billion under management. I'm based in the United States. My role is to primarily look at any technology company that would fit with our group, which is in almost every industry category internationally, everything outside of Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Kyle. And now, Lucas, please.
Hello, I'm Lucas Marchesini. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of Manta Aircraft. I'm an aeronautical engineer with an MBA and then work in several technology sectors. And in Manta, we are developing a platform for vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. And the option that we are targeting is for a vehicle with long range, quite reasonably high speed, and no need for ground infrastructure.
Thank you, Lucas. Nick still has some problems. Nick, hope you don't have any more problem. If you want to give an introduction to yourself, please. No. I think you still have some problem with the microphone. So, meanwhile we're waiting for Nick coming, I think we can move to our discussion. So I want to start with, again, we talk about mobility today. We are going green. Everything has to be not polluting. And we know that mobility is a big deal of chunk of pollution today. So today we discuss what's the stage of mobility and how we can go clean. Corrado, let me start with you. What is the future of the mobility sector, in your opinion?
Well, in short, I think it's an exciting one. Let's say, without going into the mass means of transports, I would rather look at the sea and the land mobility. So what we're looking at is in the Western world or the developed countries, there is clearly a lot that's going towards also a phase out of the combustion motors in the next 10, 15 years. And that means that we need to substitute and replace them with new technologies, including electric, but not only that. The problem is, from one end, it's on the customer side, it's the perception of the range, and clearly there is the tangible element of cost. The real problem is that on one side, in order to do 100% electricity, which I don't think will be viable for a long time. And by the time it would be viable, there will be hydrogen or other technologies that will be available. The problem is it's pretty much the energy storage on one side and the availability of the charging infrastructure, because until we will have a sufficiently dispersed and present infrastructure, it will be very difficult to have a proper, let's say, complete move towards more sustainable mobility. And the problem is that even if the availability of energy will increase, especially with renewables, the availability of that energy in large quantities, for example, for super fast chargers in remote locations, that will still be a problem, and in developing countries even more. So let's say that there are some elements there that will need a lot of attention, but the reality...
Where Corrado having
New
some connection.
electrochemistries for the battery storage are coming up. Oh, can you hear me?
We lost 1 second, Corrado. Please, the reality.
Okay. So the reality is that the battery storage is advancing at breakneck speed at the moment, and so in the next few years there will be probably new electrochemistries that will hopefully even surpass the lithium or cobalt reliance, and therefore much less taxing and demanding on the environment and the earth, and they will increase the range and the availability. On the marine sector, there's a lot that's going towards shipping. When it comes to boats, which is where we are, let's say, focusing, there is a problem, for example, on the investment sides, because it's a market that's completely under the radar. So even though the technology is already there and it's viable, there is a problem in spreading the words and the implementation. So I leave it to the others now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Corrado, for your point of view. Let me jump from one entrepreneur to an investor, and after I'm going to back to entrepreneur and next to the investor. Nick, if you can now join us, if you don't have any problem with the connection. Meanwhile, we are waiting for Nick. Kyle, what's your point of view? What's the point of view on investors on the future mobility? You invest in money. You manage a lot of money, actually. So what's your point of view in terms of where and how the money are going to not fix this problem, although it has to be fixed? How the money are going to help the development of the mobility sector?
Yeah, I think, so for context, my role is just to look at where money flows internationally. So we've mapped 50,000 companies by hand across all industries. Without speaking on particular any, like the automotive industry, and specifically, if you look at what's happening across agriculture, logistics, different supply chain tools, I think the future of mobility is incremental. What you're seeing is not a complete replacement of, I think we'll get this later discussion, of means of transport, regardless if it's a robot, a drone, a car, whatever, as opposed to being rebuilt from the bottom up. I feel like the most success and the most money goes to companies that retrofit existing products into becoming a little bit more autonomous in very specific use cases. And I can go into that later. I do agree a lot with Corrado. One of the things that I've noticed across every industry is that there's a huge sustainability component being pushed pretty heavily across the board in every single use case, which is great. I think that's very hopeful for the future of humanity. And what does that actually mean? That means exactly what Corrado was talking about. There's a lot of innovation across the every single increment of what it's necessary to have an advanced mobility infrastructure. So whether it is the energy, which is going to be a huge component, variations of how energy is created. There's a lot of branches going into different forms of energy. There's tool sets that support the grid or other infrastructure that is able to have the capacity of having mobility, whether different types of products that are in that ecosystem to support that, whether it is charging stations, whether it is tools for grids. And then there's going to be even more downstream use cases as well to the end consumer about what they actually can do now that they have a new form of mobility. So, for example, in drones, as an example, what you see today that's finds to success from a consumer, it's people moving into having their own, as a startup, moving into their own, marketplace delivery solution. So as opposed to just full delivery, we are a food ordering company that just so happens to be delivering through drones. Or, for example, if it's other more parcel delivery, long-term logistics for enterprises, it tends to be more long-distance, fixed, remote routes that tends to have a lot of success. So it's very use case specific, but then I think it'll kind of expand outwards as the infrastructure and both the incremental progress on the most practical and the cheapest means of transport just gets better and better.
Thank you, Kyle. Lucas, when I was a baby, fly with a car was just in the movie. and after I met you in Milan and I saw it was possible, can we have your point of view?
Well, we are getting there. I think we have witnessed a revolution or a new development in aviation, which is allowing to bring these cars. We call them cars, but they are not cars. But let's call them cars to the air. And this big change is the electric propulsion. Electric propulsion is allowing distributed propulsion, so it means that we can put as many propellers as we want, wherever we want, because basically we can drive a cable. In the case of the flying, let's say these flying cars, let's call them like this, we can drive a cable wherever, and we can place a propeller there. And this is much easier than driving the power through transmission axles, so mechanically. Then this means that we can invent different shapes of these vehicles, and we can come to a solution where we can take off with these vehicles vertically and then fly as an airplane or as an helicopter, and then land vertically again. And then if there are only batteries on board, we can recharge the batteries, take off again, and recharge the batteries means, as also Kyle was saying, we need the infrastructure to recharge these batteries. We will need, but we will have that in place. From the technical point of view, we are capable today of having these vehicles starting to fly, and we see that there are some in the world which are already being tested, and they are showing that they can take off from not from the garden of your house, maybe if it's big enough, yes, but we don't need so much space, and we can offer a transportation service. We can allow you to fly from your house, maybe just outside in the outskirts of the city, and go to the beach house or to another place, or just for work. And so this is something that it's coming. It will be in maybe 3 years, 4 years, something like this. We have to remember that everything that flies needs a certain certification to be allowed to fly. So this is a process which in aviation takes some time, and it doesn't take less than 2 years, maybe 3 years. We have new vehicles. So if we count for the time to develop these vehicles, which might be another 2-3 years, and then we count for a couple of years for certification, then we will be in about 2027, 2026, 2027, and at that moment I think we will start seeing these vehicles flying close to the cities, maybe not exactly in the cities, but close to the cities, and then the market will start, and then at that point the technology will be more and more proven, and it will be easier then to come up with new solutions, and it means also new services. So everybody could see these vehicles flying around. Maybe not everybody will be able to fly immediately, due to logistics, due to the cost at the beginning. But in the future, I trust that the cost will be quite affordable, and then also the infrastructure will be there. So it will take some years, I think, but by 2030, maybe we'll have something which is developed. So a system, an advanced air mobility system, which is in place.
Thank you, Lucas. We already moved to my second topic today. Are we going to fly in our cars one day? Which is a step after you just talked now. So one day, I mean, this is my dream. If I wake up in the morning, instead of or to my garage, I just go up to my, I don't know, to the top of the building where I'm living now and take it and fly. Now, do you believe it's something possible? And after, please, if Kyle, if you want to follow, and we go with all the others. Lucas, do you think it's possible one day having people
I think
flying? Let's say
it
this.
will be, yes, it will be possible, but we have to also to consider that the airspace, so it means where the vehicle, the airplanes or the aircraft move, it's big, but it's not so big. So it means that a good system for the air traffic management will be needed. And anyway, it means that the space that we have, especially in certain points, which are the focal points, which are the cities, the airspace is limited. So I doubt we will see something like in Star Wars or in some other of these movies where you see many of these vehicles flying one very close to the other one. There might be some more separation, but for sure we will see them. Yes, and especially if you live in the outskirts of a city, then it's you have more chances of having the space to take off and then fly to your beach house or in the countryside or wherever, because you will be a bit more away from these places which will be crowded. But definitely we will see this.
Kyle, where do you see the development? Do you believe automotive can one day go so far?
Yeah, I have the same dream as you. I'd love to have flying cars. I think practically it's not going to be there for a while. I mean, I don't know if you saw the recent news. Chinese company Xingpeng, who now has the drones that will latch on to your car, lift it up, and then fly you to
No.
different location using their cars. Kind of insane. But we spent a good amount of time in, you could not necessarily flying cars, but slightly looking at vehicles and more drones for delivery for quite a while. It's really, really hard for companies. It seems like there's not a fast iteration that you see in software. It takes a long time for some of these companies to get off the ground and building the hardware that is practical, that can fly a payload for a certain amount of distance using a reasonable amount of, in this case, most of them tend to be electric propulsion and going a certain X quantity of distance that's practical for whatever use case. But outside of that, most of what we've seen when it comes to people flying to destinations, it really just comes down to helicopter services that know rich people need to get into the city quickly and then out of the city quickly. And that's been, startups have raised money in that space and they've done well just on the service end. Will we get to flying cars in the future? Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to require a lot more innovation though. And I don't think that'll come for another 10, 20 years.
Corrado,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Look, everything that Lucas and Kyle said, I agree entirely with them. I think my view on that is when we're talking about flying taxis, for example, that absolutely will happen, and it will happen in a time frame that's more aligned with Lucas' thoughts. So, for example, Rolls-Royce Electrical, they acquired the startup, and so they are carrying out a number of tests now in the UK, and they are looking at having the first commercial flights happening in 2026-27, which is exactly the timeline that Lucas mentions. Where I'm a little bit more skeptical is about the, let's say, the mass implementation, because the level of artificial intelligence that you will need to manage traffic at different heights and in large numbers, it's something that we are many years away from generating the kind of power. And likewise, the idea of having an accident, that's if you touch another car, and well, then you stop. But if you touch another flying car, then that can be quite a disaster. So there are quite a few elements there that need to be considered. But what Kyle and Lucas are saying, and that is that it will happen, I don't have many doubts about that. It's just a matter of time. So probably for me, the time frame for mass, it's longer than, let's say, the optimistic views, but it will happen.
So scaling to the mass, having everyone her car is going to be far away. What is my understanding? Nick, did you manage?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
All right. Now, so let me ask you to tell us your point of view on mobility in air, and also where do you see the mobility going in the next, I don't know, 10, 20 years?
Sorry, maybe we want Nick to introduce himself also.
Of course,
Yeah.
Okay, I make it, I'm like Columbo. I'm always coming back with a question.
Please get introduce yourself, and after let's walk into.
Yeah, it's very simple. First of all, my name is Nick Lazanas. I'm the VC of Arcliff Ventures, and we are known from MEV Hammer, which we are producing since the last 9 years. We have produced 6,000 cars around the globe. This is not a lot, but the margin is very nice. So we are happy for that, right? So regarding the flying the cars, yes, absolutely. This is the only way to flee from the current traffic jams around the globe. In 1926, because I was working for Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford displayed an experimental single-seat aeroplane, and we speak about 1926. So the idea of the flying car is nothing new, from my point of view. Science fiction writers, as I hear from Lucas, for the, I would say, Blade Runner or Fifth Element, we saw a lot of these flying cars. So what does it actually mean? I think it means a lot. The thing is that the personal computer and the mobile phone, from my point of view, early adoption will be dictated by price. And because this is dictated by the price, in the beginning, the people who are having money will afford to buy those flying cars. But the cost of the technology after launch only gives one way. That means the price goes down and the demand increases. So at the end of the day, from our point of view, yes, there will be more flying cars out there as we can imagine. And all this at the same time, cost efficiency, electricity powered, and nearly 100% pollution free. This is what we think will be happening in the future regarding the flying cars.
Where do you see mobility? Not regarding flying cars, but the mobility itself. Where is going to?
The mobility itself, I would say, is the key technologies are 3 points. The first of all will be electrification of vehicles, connected and autonomous vehicles, and mobility as a service. What does that mean? Accelerating the global transition to safer, cleaner, and more inclusive transportation. The system optimizing the delivery of the goods and ensuring easy access for mobility for everyone. The world's population, according to some figures we can read, will swell to 10 billion by 2050. If this is true, and in the face of this rapid growth, the mobility systems in megacities are being overstretched while rural areas are falling further behind. So that means at the end of the day, the mobility will be facing a big transformational shifts in a new generation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. Please stay with us. Don't go. What about green? I mean, we talk about green every day, and we know everyone we need to pollute as less as we can. But is one day possible going 100% green, which means having mobility using only clean energy? What do you think, Kai?
I mean, I think it's possible. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon in the region in Southeast Asia or a lot of the APAC region. The advancements that you have to make from on infrastructure is extreme. I mean, from an investor standpoint, looking outside of Southeast Asia, you see it across the board in every angle. Everyone's focusing on how to transition into a greener form of energy or reusable form of energy in almost every use case, which is great. Think about the leap from what Southeast Asia had to go through when the fintech revolution happened. We didn't have credit cards. Most people weren't in banking. And then all of a sudden you take that leap into everyone's in digital banking because you can open up a bank account on a phone. That was very recent, right? The same thing with the computer. Most people didn't have a laptop. Billions of people didn't have a laptop. And then everyone jumps to the phone. So most of Southeast Asia, everyone operates and has 2 different smartphones. You can't do the same with infrastructure and on the energy side. It's extremely costly and really challenging. The 4th largest country in the world, for example, Indonesia, the main island Java, which has hundreds of millions of people, just recently opened up a major highway that would connect 2 parts of 2 really big cities. And that's like a huge advancements at the time that reduces a lot of congestion, that improves a lot of supply chain, that advances the country in different ways. But to see a transition to clean energy from the APAC side, it's a long way. It's a very long way. It'll happen, but it's going to take a lot longer than will happen in Europe, US, and even probably Latin America.
Thank you, Kai. Corrado, what do you think?
Well, I think Kali is spot on. It will happen, but not shortly. And certainly it will not be quick enough to help, let's say, hit the climate change targets for the next 10 years. Now, with the current technologies, clearly this is the difficulty. In 5 years, there are new electrochemistries that are coming up for batteries that might make it viable. Plus, renewables are expanding and in efficiency, number, in availability. The types of the renewables are also expanding. So there's now for the sea, for example, we can start looking at tidal energy, which might be massive and will not touch anything else that we are using at the moment. When we talk, though, about being 100% green, there are some elements that will need to be considered. Because, for example, if we have to go ahead with extraction of any materials in order to be to build the energy storage or to build anything else, well, that will have an impact. So can it be 100% green? You'd have to offset so much of the rest that it would make it pretty much impossible. And then it's not only CO2, there's nitrous oxides, which it's much more damaging than CO2 or HFCs. So the ones that damage ozones. But there are also small things which probably will be resolved with the flying cars, but like the dust particles from the brakes in cars, those ones are the infamous PM10s. I mean, those ones are cancerogen and they create massive problems, especially in metropolis situations. So let's say, can we go very far? Yes. 100%, maybe 99.
Thank you, Corrado. Lucas, can you propel fly cars 100% green?
Well, I think I joined the view of Corrado because what do we mean with green? If we mean no emission locally, yes, we can do it. But from somewhere, the energy must come. So unless we have these energy sources, one was mentioned by Corrado, tidal energy. This would be almost totally green, but it depends on how far back we push our analysis of the environmentally green solution. Because if we think about tidal energy, then we have to think that somehow we have to build these things, and then we start. It's a never-ending process. So I would say that more practically, we can think about reducing what today is really causing big troubles, which are gas emissions in the cities, and then in the future, more in the years, we will step to the other levels, like going and reducing the overall emission. And so it's a step. I think it's a progress that will come. It's not that we will manage to be completely green, I think, because when we produce energy, we need something. Even if the energy is clean, we need something to capture the energy, and we have to build the thing to capture the energy. So I think it's more about understanding what is polluting and choosing how to pollute, because some pollutants might be less damaging than other pollutants, and especially if we produce this somewhere else and we do not concentrate everything in a city. So I think the life in the cities will improve. Yes, in several areas we will improve and we will reduce some emissions or some pollution, but going completely green when we need energy, I see it a bit difficult.
Thank you, Lucas. Nick, please, do you believe we can one day be 100% clean?
I fully agree with Corrado explanation, because I would say yes and no. Switching to clean energy is the best chance we have of slowing down the climate crisis. That we know. But by generating power that produces fewer greenhouse than fossil fuels, we are diversifying our energy supplies and reducing dependence on ground ravaging fuels. So there is a professor, we as Arclight Ventures made an analysis. If indeed we are in the position to start a project to make it 100% green. And according to a professor called Jacques Trainer, he mentioned that there is no zero emission energy supplies because you have to manufacture the devices. So that means the installation, you have to manufacture them, right? And for them to be zero emission, there would have to be zero emission energy mixes. So in principle, we can say we try our best, but there is a mix-up. And I think that there is a yes and a no, because we can try, but to reach the 100%, I'm not very sure if this is possible.
I wanted to follow
Please,
up on Lucas's point real quick. I think Lucas is also right, because from the investment side, what I see mostly in the US and Europe, everyone's focused right now on measuring their emissions. And you see a software tool for every industry: construction, retail, logistics. There's an analytics tool that's saying, how do you measure reliably your emissions and then validate that? And then I think that's going to be the first wave, once everyone actually can measure their emission. And then the second wave is going to be, how do you offset it? It's not going to go from like everyone changes to an electric car and then materials are renewable. It's going to be how can we, and I think that's really what's going to be 100% green is it's going to be an offset. It's going to be, okay, how can we sequester carbon from the atmosphere through soil, or how can we use different cooking oils, or how can we take bio waste, reprocess it to create cement? How can we take emissions from an industrial, poles and pull out the carbon from that? Can we pull out carbon directly from the air? Replacing that, that's how we're going to be 100% green. So it's like what Lucas said. I think 100% is it's not going to be 100%, and then what everybody else says, it's not going to be 100% green. It's we measure now, we pull out now, in the future we offset it, and then it's going to, the rest of the market's just going to continue to figure out what's going to be the cheapest opportunities across whatever industry they need for energy use cases or for whatever.
Yeah. If I may join these parts, actually, Kai, you mentioned something very interesting about all the part of the calculation, and so there are a lot of startups at the moment in the climate tech sector which are looking at ways to calculate the CO2 emissions of the supply chain to get to building something. And in some cases, we're talking of potentially hundreds or thousands of items that have to be considered and factored in to get to eventually the end products, which might be the turbine for tidal energy. And the problems that they are encountering, the computing power to factor in everything, it's just massive. So that is one thing, but it's something where there is a lot of interest already, and some companies are already making waves about that. The other element is probably we don't need any way to be 100% green. Even if we were 90% or 80%, the reality is that the planet can sustain a level of emissions. So we don't need to be at zero. There have always been emissions, and if it wasn't something which was human-made, it was the volcanoes or it was something else. So if we reduce them, that might be sufficient, reduce them dramatically, clearly, but that might be sufficient to actually come back to a level where it is sustainable for the planet.
I do agree. I mean, sometimes I think actually it's not needed 100, maybe 70, 80 is enough, right? So there's not we are some very much we get to be too extreme, everything or nothing. So we can be in between, and I do agree with you, Corrado. We have one Lionel, which is I know personally, and is doing a great startup as well. The traditional way of energy distribution is build large system of generation and delivering it to users. There is opportunity here to change the energy structure by localized generation. Each house, each factory, each building generating its own energy, green energy sharing, overflow with the local areas. Is this a more financially feasible way? Who wants to take it? Right. Do you think it is feasible?
To have distributed energy? Yeah, I think.
Energy.
I mean, I'm seeing investments across the board of ways in which there are companies, especially using solar to offset and using regional solar plants to power different regional energy grids. You see a lot of weird use cases as well. For example, like you see a lot of like crypto mining as an example, which says that they will offer renewable energy distributed locations. If they have peak loads or peak energy that they don't use, they can use that energy to fuel their crypto mines to still make money off of their energy. Yeah, I think that's probably the best, though. I think, but I don't know 100% sure, because I feel like we'll kind of see how everything shakes out. I think you're going to see a combination of very distributed, and there's been a lot of investments made, especially by a lot of like big oil companies within products that can manage distributed grids. But yeah, we'll see.
I'm going to take one more question, and after we go back to our schedule. Christian, I mean, I don't. I mean, I will stop with Krista because I know I'm going to make a disaster if I'm going to pronounce all the name. I'm very sorry, Krista. How important is in the overall getting out of the idea phase and or paralyzed by analysis and get into the prototyping, validation, and so on, right? And after, an idea could remain as it is, for instance, since 1926. But if we don't set up small experimentations and investment in it, so important to generate this space. So thank you for making it happening. So, what's your point of view? Shall we? Uh, Let me summarize. Do we talk too much, or do we act very little so far? Because we've been talking so much about, clean, clean, clean. But again, we are not there. We talk a lot, but uh, today we have a clean summit. Everyone is talking about climate, but there is not that much done actually. So I do agree with Christian. We should do more, right? What's your point of view, Lucas? Do we think we do too little?
Well, I think that we do as much as is allowed by the investments that are done in this. So the development of new technologies requires investments, and the change of a system requires a lot of effort. We have a system which is organized in a way that is coming since decades, with using fossil fuels, using cars and buses and airplanes, I mean everything, and ships. It work in a certain way. If we want to change all of this, it's not just changing one piece, because we have to change the complete system, the ecosystem. Okay, with all the stakeholders have to adapt. So this means that a big effort is required, and my question is, who is going to pay for all this? Because if we leave it to the companies will find the solutions which are more convenient for the company. So it's the more no, the not the more sustainable solution, but the best solution for the revenues. It's true that the ESG topic is important today, so companies are investing anyway in ESG solutions. But at the end of the day, the goal of the company is to please the shareholders and make money. So somebody else above has to decide this. Governments are intervening, that's true, but still, I think the investments that are done cannot change the system so quickly. That is the note that is coming from there. We need more investments in this. We need to see how changing the system we can improve the efficiency of the process, or also generating more revenues. Then everybody will be incentivized into this, in this direction, and move into this direction. I don't know if maybe Kyle, from my point of view,
Yes,
can say
I
what
was
is.
moving.
Yeah.
I was moving to Kai. Kai, how important is money into this process?
So I disagree. I think there's a lot being done right now, and I see it in every industry because we map every industry. Look at agriculture. The future of agriculture is building food products that are renewable, as opposed to, you can take meat as the big trend right now, but it's moving into other categories like dairy, proteins, etc. You can look at both the farming products. Pesticides are moving into things like pheromone based, which is a much more natural product for the environment. It's not hurtful or harmful. People, we talked about it earlier, there's carbon sequestration, people changing microbes within the soil, trying to evolve it. If you look at industries like manufacturing, the biotechnology, and also chemical synthesis of various forms of that is basically changing various types of products into high value items. You're seeing, we talked even earlier before on the energy and industrial side, there's a lot more investments done on both helping enterprises upgrade their infrastructures so that they have a cheaper energy bill, but that's also more green. Then you're seeing advancements into the grid infrastructure, long-term storage. It's more sustainable. Plus, cost of solar is plummeted. You're seeing a lot more solar being used. I mean, I see it across the board in every vertical and almost every industry that there are being investments. what's different this time around than the past is it's more practical for the first time. We're seeing companies able to build cost competitive, sustainable products that either match or are below the price of what was the existing products or services that were in the market that were costly. And the list goes on. You can go into the supply chain. There's a handful of companies that are upgrading their fleets into electrical fleets. You can look at, and there's advantages to a lot of these actual sustainable improvements to the business as well. So some categories still might be expensive in some industries, but for the most part, we're seeing the economics start finally to balance out. And that's why right now is why I see a lot of early stage investments and late stage investments into companies that are tackling this problem across the board. It's not direct, like, for example, there are startups that have just this pure product that says we pull carbon from the air and you produce clean air. That's not really what's going to move the needle here, and that's not really practical economically still. But the future is incremental into different processes, and it's doing little, like, death by 1,000 cuts to this problem. It's little tweaks here and there of advancing and evolving the ecosystem, and it's happening all over, which is good. That's what we wanted. It's hopeful for the future of humanity.
Can I
Absolutely.
add to that? So I think on Luca's intervention, I would say spot on, but I agree 50% with that. So and the 50% is when we're talking of age of technology startups, like Luca's case, so flying taxis, flying cars, and so on. Technology is vital and it is extremely capital intensive, and therefore investment there is totally necessary. But technology is already available, and for a lot of sectors, the technology can already be used. So going back to what was the initial question in the chat, the reality is that in many cases, and I have to stop the VCs in the group now, but a lot of the VC interest at the moment is being put right in the technology and in being like deep tech and so on, whereas in many cases it's just not necessary. And having a patent doesn't necessarily protect the company and the long-term prospects of the company. In some cases, an innovative business or operating model can be as protectable as a patent. So let's say the approach to doing things, not just keeping on investing in new technology, it's something that should probably be reviewed a little bit in a lot of the VC's approach. And this is the end of Kyle's, what he was saying. I will reconnect this to the previous question, which was about the dispersed or fragmented, let's say, more localized production of energy. The reality is that in everything we're talking about, there is not a solution that fits all. Everything that we're talking about is something where we will need a number of different solutions that will need to be consolidated to work together and then produce the goods. So smart grid alone, localized, is a fantastic thing. It will not work alone. The massive power plants outside cities are a fantastic thing, but they will not resolve the problem, also because of all the transmission costs that are involved in running maybe 50, 100 miles to go from where the energy is generated to the actual point of utilization. And the same goes with the fact that some of those plants will be solar and therefore active during the day. Other plants will be wind or tidal or whatever else, and they will have different peak times and so on. So the energy storage will become what will be the big game changer and the one that will make it or break it for everything that regards green mobility or let's say greener planet.
Thank you, Corrado. So we talk a lot about clean energy. Everything comes to clean, but a very little see talking about acoustic pollution. What do you think? Where are we standing now, Corrado? Because I do believe, for example, e-cars, e-vehicles are very less noisy than the one I was born in 1970, where I remember my father's car was so noisy. So we got a lot of improvement so far. But what's the point of view? How do we stand not only for cars, but do we stand today in terms of acoustic pollution, not only the we never talk actually about acoustic pollution, but I do believe it's a problem itself as well.
Look, in big cities, yes. At sea, in many cases, with some of the boats that go around, it can be a problem. Electric mobility will resolve the majority of that problem, if not all, completely. So much so that we actually have the opposite problem in some cases, where, for example, a blind person will not hear a car or a moped coming, electric one, and so it actually increases the dangers. I've probably spoken already too much during this panel, so I'll probably pass the ball to Lucas, because one thing that actually might generate much more acoustic pollution in the future might be the flying cars. Because if you have a lot of propellers working together and a lot of those flying cars at the same time, that frankly might become a problem, and it could be very noisy. But I'll leave it to Lucas to.
We ask soon to Lucas. Lucas, please.
Yes, because we have to see where the noise comes from. In the cars, it comes from a certain part of the car. In the aircraft, usually it comes from the propulsion system. And so it depends, the amount of noise depends on how the propulsion system is designed. There is a big effort now to design propellers which are not so noisy. When you hear an aircraft passing on above you and it's a propeller aircraft, the noise that you hear most is the one produced by the propeller. It's not the one produced by the engine. So it's important to understand which are the sources of this noise. And as you say, Corrado, when we have so many propellers, we have to design the propellers well, because these are the ones which produce the noise, obviously. And the noise is related to the shape of the propeller for sure, but it's also related to the weight that you have to lift, right? So it's a combination of aspects. For sure, we have with the electric motors, at least one source of noise we have improved, because an electric motor is not as noisy as an internal combustion engine. That's usually is like this. So this is something that we have improved for sure. But as also connecting again to the previous question was, we have to invest in different areas of the technology, in different sectors, in different parts, because we have to improve them all. It's not only one will solve the problem. So we have to improve in the case of air vehicles or flying cars. We have to improve about in using electric motors, but we have to improve also using appropriate propellers. And in case of cars or trucks, we have also the noise coming from the tires, which if you live close to a highway, you'll notice immediately the noise that comes from the tires of the trucks that run on the highway. So it's just an example to say that sources of noise are different. We have to study these sources of noise. And now there is an effort to create mathematical models to study better the source of noise and how this noise propagates. Because if we have noise, for example, on the highway, we can use an asphalt which absorbs noise, for example, right? So we can also find solutions which do not, which help, curing the problem, which do not go to the source of the problem, but help curing the problem. It's more or less what Kai was saying at the beginning. Maybe we cannot be totally green, but we can offset, right? So we cannot cure the problem at the root, but we can do something that will compensate for the damage that we create. So it's a kind of this. So I think it's to conclude is that the noise pollution, noise generation noise pollution is important for sure. And the main tool that I think that we have to develop now is the analysis of this, how to study this and then find the solutions. There are already many projects in the different areas to reduce the noise.
Thank you, Lucas. Kyle, how much has been done so far in reducing pollution in your perspective?
In noise pollution,
Yeah.
not much. I don't think. I mean, you've seen like pretty far out use cases of using kinetic energy or unique forms of capturing noise to turn into energy, but that doesn't stop the noise problem. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's really the top of everybody's list at the moment because, today we don't have, drones constantly flying over the top of us. But it also, I think it depends on which city you live in, what's your tolerance level for noise.
Of course, in the countryside, yeah, less probable. When you live in the city, for example, in London, it's unbelievable the level of acoustic pollution you can have. So, I mean, this is the topic that I really the most concern me. The mobility infrastructure, how it will look like in the next, let's say, 100 years. Do we have today? We do not have the infrastructure for what we would like to have in terms of maybe one day fly the car and so on. Where do you see, Lucas? Let me start with you. What will the mobility infrastructure of the next 100 years look like? I know it's too far away, 100 years. Let's talk about 50 maybe. Where it will look like? I mean, I'm a dreamer. I love dreaming. I dream every day, any second. But would be lovely one day to see really, I don't know, having the roads we had today on the sky. What's your point of view?
You know what will solve every problem? It's teletransportation. That will solve everything. Teletransport will solve all our problems. But until we get there, well, we have different solutions, obviously, that we are improving. But I only see that there is a progress, a continuous progress in these in the different ways that we are using now. So it means ground transportation, air transportation, and what I think will change is beside the vehicles and the technology, which is something that is going to change, but it's also how we see the transportation. I mean, more and more today we see the transportation as a service, and so it means that we are moving toward a solution where we do not own the vehicle and we use the service of the transportation. For example, in the cities, more and more we can use these share vehicles. We do not need our vehicle; we just need the service. And going down this road, then we might see one option that it comes to my mind is that there will be more systems to offer the services for everyone, but without obliging everyone to have his own car. It's difficult when we do point-to-point transportation, but with the progress of the shared services or the shared vehicles, this could be quite easily attainable in a short time. I think we are going into this direction for this aspect, but we can talk about many aspects in transportation, obviously. So I don't know which one we want to tackle.
I think you already answered a lot. Corrado, you have both experience. You have been working in sharing economy and with the previous project, and now you are in the maritime. How do you see this topic evolving?
Look, the future of infrastructure at the moment is almost unfathomable to imagine what it will be in 50 or 100 years. And so I think on one side, the advances in technology will be such that in some cases we can't even imagine what it will be like in the future. there are already ways to produce hydrogen in, let's say, relatively small quantities, completely dispersed, and that can change a lot, for example, for boats or for places in remote locations, or simply for cars that require less energy, for example, for shorter journeys. One thing that will certainly, I believe, become more and more important will be micromobility.
When I talk about infrastructure, for example, even when the charging station, today we do not have enough. And if you want to buy an EV car, maybe you need to queue unless you have in your garage. Kyle, where do you see this problem standing today? Where do you see in 100 years' time, it just is saying, but where do you see the future in infrastructure when it comes to mobility?
Well, I think 100 years is a long time. Like it was only 100. It was 100 years prior that, like, what, 1908 was the Ford Model T, the first, not the first car, but first industrial car probably in America. So that was from 100 years ago to today. Now today we have drones that pick up cars off the ground. What's going to happen in 100 years' time? That's hard to guess. I think. So my biggest view on the future, like 100 years from now, what I don't know is going to happen, but I feel like is that there'll be a new evolution of technology that will just completely change what we think of as transportation and infrastructure. Does that mean we find a new propulsion method that just completely changes the need for the types of vehicles that we have today? I don't know. Does that mean that all of a sudden we put a chip in our head and we don't physically need to be everywhere because we can digitally be everywhere? I don't know. I feel like that is going to be the future. And so whatever that new evolution, like revolutionary technology is going to be, that's going to just completely change what is infrastructure. I hope infrastructure is not going to be relatively the same today. Yeah, there'll be batteries everywhere. There should be charging stations. Everything will be electric. Everyone will look back and think it's crazy that we drove around vehicles that had explosions in them, and then and it'll be kind of I think that there will be a lot more autonomous vehicles that'll run everywhere. I do, and there'll be different form factors because they just need to cater to different use cases. I do believe that will happen, but 100 years time, I feel like we'll figure out how to reverse gravity and fly into space. That's at least my hopes. I don't know.
Thank you, Kyle. Corrado.
Massive, I would say that.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Go, Lucas. Go. After Corrado.
I would think that progressing into the future, maybe the long distances will see less individual means of transportation. That could be something. And then individual means of transportation are needed for the last mile, last 5 miles, last 10 miles. But in the long distances, today, to me, it's not so efficient to have many individual means of many cars flying 400, 500 kilometers or hundreds of kilometers. So in this case, we could have infrastructure like Hyperloop, but also trains, high-speed trains, or something else, which is mass transportation infrastructure for long distances. And then, as also Corrado was saying, micromobility to allow the individual movement in the cities and the last miles. So maybe reducing individual means of transportation for long distances and increasing them in the last or beginning and at the end of the beginning and at the end of the trip.
Maybe the metaverse will sort everything out because we stay home and we do everything in city, and that's the best way to fix the infrastructure. I'm kidding, but you never know. Andreas, it's a very long time, but let's dream. Corrado, if you want, you can.
So I think in the end, Lucas touched upon the micro-mobility elements. Clearly, autonomous driving might have a huge impact. And again, as artificial intelligence power keeps going up and improving, autonomous driving will make changes because some of the for example, the safety measures that we need to have as part of the road infrastructure will probably disappear, or anyway will change dramatically. If flying cars actually become a mainstream way to move, well, will we see towers which will have the different levels to stop and recharge there rather than having to land somewhere? I mean, we're talking of sci-fi, but actually it's all stuff that might be possible the moment that certain technologies will become viable. But one thing that I agree entirely with everyone else in the panel is that the technological advances that we're seeing are such that the world as we see it now will be different in the future. We can't know what it will be, right? Because some things will come up and we can't even imagine what they will be.
The beauty of entrepreneurs like you, like Lucas, is envision the future and I don't know, dreaming as much as you can. And so that's beautiful. That's why we are talking about 100 years time. And investor, they should give you the money to keep going and keep dreaming and keep moving. That's how economy works, right? Guys, unless you want to add something more, I really thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. We've been capable to get into the 1 hour and 15 minutes, so I'm very happy. Thank you so much for being with us, sharing your knowledge. And for this year, we have finished with our panel discussions. We will jump in 2023. We are still going every Tuesday at 5 o'clock UK time, bringing 6 of our founders in EquityMatch to pitch their ideas. Thank you again to Kyle, Lucas, Corrado, to Nick, although he had some problems today, and to all the people watching us. And I'll see you again next time, probably the first one in January 2023. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Max.
It was a pleasure.
Max, appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.